What did ancient humans actually eat? If you've ever read a diet book, you've probably seen the phrase, our ancestors ate this way. Caveman diet, paleo, eat like your DNA expects you to. Here's the problem. Nobody who says that actually knows what ancient humans ate. Not really, because the honest answer isn't a diet plan. It's one of the strangest, messiest, most regionally chaotic stories in human history. And it involves rotten meat, fermented maggots, bone marrow eaten with sharpened rocks, and at least one society that ran almost entirely on a single root vegetable. So let's actually find out. Not the marketing version. The real one, pieced together from fossilized teeth, ancient poop, and 3 million-year-old garbage piles. First, let's deal with the biggest myth, that there's one ancestral human diet. There isn't. There never was. Humans have existed as a species for roughly 300,000 years. Our broader hominin ancestors go back over 4 million years. And in that time, humans have lived on every continent except Antarctica, in deserts, rainforests, Arctic tundra, mountain ranges, and river deltas. A human living in the Arctic 10,000 years ago ate almost nothing but meat and fat for most of the year, because that's all that existed there. A human living in the same era in Southeast Asia ate mostly tubers, fruit, fish, and insects, because that's what their environment offered. Asking, what did ancient humans eat, is a little like asking, what do modern humans eat? Well, which ones? In Tokyo? In rural Kenya? In Norway? The honest answer is, it depended entirely on where you were standing. But here's what's actually fascinating. When you zoom out across all those wildly different environments, some surprising patterns repeat. And that's the real story. Let's go back. Way back. Over 3 million years, to a hominin called Australopithecus, the genus that includes the famous fossil Lucy. For decades, scientists assumed our earliest ancestors ate mostly fruit and leaves, similar to modern chimpanzees. Then, in 2012, researchers analyzed carbon isotopes trapped in the tooth enamel of Australopithecus fossils. And the results were strange. Tooth enamel locks in a chemical signature of whatever plants you mostly ate, because it reflects how those plants processed sunlight during growth. And Australopithecus teeth showed something unexpected. A heavy reliance on a plant group that includes grasses and sedges, not the soft fruit-heavy diet researchers expected. That means our ancestors, over 3 million years ago, may have been eating tough, fibrous, low-quality plant food that most apes avoid, possibly using stone tools, found nearby, to access roots and underground storage organs other animals couldn't easily reach. This matters because it suggests something important. Even before we were technically human, our ancestors were already doing something distinct, eating what other primates couldn't, or wouldn't. Now, here's where it gets controversial, because this is the part diet books love to cherry-pick. Around 2.6 million years ago, we start finding something new at hominin sites. Animal bones with cut marks. Not bite marks from a predator. Cut marks, made by stone tools, scraping meat off bone. But, and this is the part that gets left out, the bones also show something else. Percussion marks. Bones smashed open. Why does that matter? Because early hominins weren't necessarily hunting these animals. A lot of evidence suggests they were scavenging, getting to carcasses after lions or hyenas had already eaten the soft meat, and then smashing the bones open for the one resource the big predators couldn't easily access: bone marrow. Marrow is an incredible find if you're a small, slow, weaponless hominin. It's almost pure fat, extremely calorie-dense, doesn't spoil as fast as meat, and packed with nutrients your brain desperately needs. And that's the real headline here. Some researchers, including paleoanthropologist Leslie Aiello, have proposed something called the expensive tissue hypothesis. The idea that as hominins started eating more calorie-dense, easily digestible foods like marrow and meat, their gut could shrink because digestion got easier. And that freed up metabolic energy for something else entirely. A bigger brain. In other words, getting better at finding fatty, dense food may be one of the reasons we eventually became the kind of species that could ask a question like, what did ancient humans eat in the first place? The next massive shift is fire. And the timeline here is genuinely debated. Some evidence puts controlled fire use as early as 1 million years ago, possibly earlier at sites like Wonderwork Cave in South Africa. Though widespread, habitual use seems to show up more clearly around 400,000 years ago. Why does cooking matter so much? Because it's basically pre-digestion. Cooked food is dramatically easier to chew and absorb. Primatologist Richard Wrangham has argued, in what's now a fairly influential theory, that cooking may have been one of the key turning points that allowed for smaller teeth, smaller guts, and yes, more energy available for bigger brains. Think about a raw potato versus a baked one. Raw, it's hard, bitter, takes enormous energy to chew and digest, and your body extracts relatively few calories from it. Cooked, it softens completely, and your gut can pull out dramatically more energy with way less effort. So by the time we get to actual Homo sapiens, modern humans, fire isn't a luxury anymore. It's infrastructure. It's the thing that lets a huge range of foods that used to be barely edible become genuine calorie sources. Okay, here's where we get to drop the millions of years ago guesswork and look at something far more solid. Actual hunter-gatherer societies that anthropologists have directly studied, going back over a century. And the data here genuinely breaks the caveman diet stereotype. Take the Hadza people of Tanzania, one of the most studied hunter-gatherer groups alive today. Living a lifestyle anthropologists believe closely resembles ancient foraging patterns. Their diet is roughly split between meat, honey, baobab fruit, and tubers, and honey alone can make up a significant chunk of their caloric intake during certain seasons. Yes, wild honey, sometimes eaten raw off the comb, larvae included, is a major ancestral food source. Not exactly lean protein and leafy greens. Or look at the Arctic Inuit, whose traditional diet was almost entirely meat and fat, seal, whale, fish, with extremely limited plant food because almost nothing edible grows there. Their bodies adapted over generations, including genetic adaptations related to fat metabolism that researchers have found are distinct from populations with plant-heavy ancestral diets. Now compare that to groups like the Tucanoan people of the Amazon, whose traditional diet leaned heavily on cassava, a starchy root, supplemented with fish and fruit, with meat playing a much smaller role. 3 real human populations, 3 almost opposite diets, all of them genuinely ancestral. All of them, by traditional measures, relatively free of modern chronic disease before dietary westernization. The pattern isn't a specific food list. The pattern is this: humans are metabolically flexible. We are, biologically, one of the most dietarily adaptable species that has ever existed. That flexibility, not any single ancient menu, is arguably our actual evolutionary advantage. Let's get into some of the genuinely surprising stuff. The things that never make it into the diet culture version of ancestral eating. Insects. For most of human history, and in many cultures still today, insects were a completely normal protein source. Termites, grubs, locusts, high in protein and fat, abundant, and far easier to hunt than a fleeing animal. Entomophagy, the scientific term for eating insects, was likely a far more consistent food source for early humans than dramatic mammoth hunts. Fermented and aged food. Long before refrigeration, many cultures intentionally let food age, ferment, or partially decompose, not as a failure, but as a technique. Some Arctic groups, for example, traditionally fermented fish or meat underground for extended periods, producing food that modern palates often find genuinely shocking, but that provided crucial nutrients, including vitamin C, in environments with almost no available produce. And shellfish, increasingly, archaeologists believe coastal foraging, including shellfish collection, played a far bigger role in early human diets than previously assumed, particularly along ancient coastlines now underwater due to sea level rise, which is part of why this evidence is so hard to find. The takeaway isn't go eat fermented fish. It's that the real ancestral diet was opportunistic, resourceful, occasionally strange by modern standards, and absolutely nothing like a clean, curated wellness brand meal plan. So if there's no single ancient human diet, what's the actual takeaway here? A few things seem genuinely well supported by the evidence. 1. Humans evolved to handle a very wide range of food sources, not a narrow, fixed one. Our flexibility is the adaptation, not any specific ingredient list. 2. Most traditional and ancestral diets, however different from each other, tended to share a few features. They were largely unprocessed, seasonally variable, and required real physical effort to obtain. That's arguably a bigger shift from ancient eating than any specific food being in or out. And 3, maybe the most interesting point, What made humans successful wasn't a perfect diet at all. It was the ability to adapt our diet to almost anywhere on the planet, using tools, fire, and shared knowledge passed down through generations. That adaptability is arguably one of the most human things about us. If you liked this video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more.